The attempt, in fact, is being made to guide the youth towards romantic relationships, which they can have, combining it with a superior version of happiness, which is free of guilt and risk. Touch, in fact, is one of the five ways, according to Gary Chapman, in which love may be expressed. So, touch is one of the five love languages that he talks about. What are the other four? And therefore, sex is not only a need, it is a necessity for the continuation of the species, continuation of the world as we know it. And recognizing this necessity in the ancient Indian culture, four pillars of life were considered equally important. And the first one.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. The title of today's talk is The Tricky Triad: Love, Touch, and Sex. Reconciling Sexuality with Safety, Dignity, and Spirituality. Our speaker with us today is Dr. Ramesh Bijlani. Dr. Bijlani is a prolific writer and an inspirational speaker. He loves to use the gift of communication that he has received from the divine for dispensing small doses of love and wisdom from the inexhaustible pharmacy of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Once a professor at AIMS New Delhi, Dr. Bijlani is now a spiritual seeker at Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. Welcome, Dr. Bijlani, sir. Thank you so much for joining. We look forward to this interesting session, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Arunima. Some people may be wondering what this topic, love, touch, and sex, has got to do with the platform that we are, especially that it concerns spirituality, yoga also from the point of view of spirituality, and education too. What's this topic doing there? The spirituality that we talk about is a life embracing spirituality, a life affirming spirituality. And therefore, everything that is an angle of, everything that is an aspect of life has a spiritual angle to it. And we like to get into it. And certainly, this is one of the important aspects of life. And it does have a spiritual angle, and that's what we shall look at. But before the young people who may be watching conclude that here is an old man trying to take away all the happiness from us, the one source of happiness that we have, that also is being taken away or being portrayed as something which is sinful, I'll do nothing of that sort. And the attempt, in fact, is being made to guide the youth towards romantic relationships, which they can have, combining it with a superior version of happiness, which is free of guilt and risk. That is the idea of this session. Going back to my childhood, uh, I had a grandmother. So, what's unique about that? Everybody has two grandmothers. Well, not that there's anything unique about having a grandmother, but I'm talking about my maternal grandmother, my Nani. Uh, she never went for the movies. And when we asked her why, she said, "What is there? There's only one thing in all of them, and that is love." क्या रखा है सब में प्यार ही तो है. Now, as if in the tone in she spoke as if she was talking about something evil, something sinful. So why go and watch something in which something bad? But these days, everybody is talking so much about love, and we have learned to see it positively as something which makes our life enjoyable, meaningful, and in fact, not only loving others, but self love is also being talked about a lot. Well, I'll not get into self love because that can be misunderstood. Some people concluding that it is type of narcissism, something very selfish, and some may conclude that unless you love yourself, how can you love others? And therefore, it is justified, and so on. So we'll not get into that because that has many ways of being looked at and many angles to it. And if I may put it in just one line, it depends upon how you spell the word S. If it is S in self-love, whether it's occurring when it's occurring in the middle of a sentence. If you spell it with a small s, then yes, it can be very selfish. If you spell it with a capital S, then it acquires a different meaning altogether. And life is about moving from that small s to the capital S. Looks like a small difference, but makes a big difference. So, with that, we'll stop here and instead go to the topic itself with the help of the PowerPoint that I have. So, we're talking about this tricky triad: love, touch, and sex. Now, love is something which we understand, or at least can feel something about. And we know that one of the expressions of love is touch. And both love and touch are also associated with sex. However, love can exist without touch and sex. Touch can exist without love and sex. And sex can exist without love and touch. Now, all these things are possible. No? But by and large, we tend to associate these three. And today, the focus will be on romantic love. But at the same time, we should try to look at the way it can extend to other areas of life, making life meaningful. Sri Aurobindo has called love the bright link between earth and heaven. Now, that is something which should give us something, so at least some sense of curiosity. How does it become a link between earth and heaven? Which means that it can ennoble earth and lift it to the level of heaven. Now, love is a need, and both giving love and receiving love is a need. And we always have, all of us have, something which we can give. And if we look around, we can find somebody to receive what we have to give. It is a need, and one way to sort of emphasize this or to prove this would be that those who do not receive love in their life, whether it is in childhood, because the parents are too busy giving love, or the parents are quarreling amongst themselves and they are for not able to give love, whatever the reasons may be. But many children are being deprived of true parental love these days. And in school, once again, the teacher may not focus on giving love, and some children, in fact, may end up getting more of criticism and punishment and humiliation even in school. So it has been found that those who do not receive this love in life are do not grow up normally. They have psychological issues. When they are further grown up, their own relationships suffer, which means that they have great difficulty in also really having a proper, healthy, romantic relationship. And this continues further into their life after marriage, after becoming parents. Sometimes they tend to repeat the patterns which made them the way they are, which means that the impact can go on generation after generation. We'll not get into that. And some of them may turn criminals. In fact, some studies are available on criminals in jails and found that the majority of people there are those who did not receive love in their life. So both giving and receiving love are a basic human need. Having said that, all types of love is not the same. There are many rungs of love, levels of love, and we'll go into this in further detail a little later. But essentially, the difference is that the lowest rung of love is that which concentrates on what do I get from this relationship, which seems like love. What do I get from it? Do I get happiness from it? Do I get some other benefits or something which I like from it? So the focus is on getting something. And the highest rung of love is that in which the focus is on giving, and one loves for the sake of giving and the joy of giving. So that is the highest rung of love. And there are many shades in between. And of course, the one way to look at the intermediate shades would be they're a mixture of give and take. Like love, touch is also a basic need. This person, Desmond Morris, is a zoologist, but there are many books that he has written about human beings. His best known book is The Naked Ape, which refers to human beings because he says that out of the 192, I think, species of apes, are monkey like creatures, human being is the only one that is not covered all over with hair. So, since we are not covered all over with hair, he has called man the naked ape. This is another of his wonderful books, Intimate Behavior. which is more about human behavior than animal behavior. He does talk about animal behavior also, and brings out the similarities that we have with our evolutionary ancestors, the animals. The important things that he brings out is that touch is a basic need, and the origin of it goes back to our beginnings in the mother's womb. In the mother's womb, a child is surrounded on all sides with a warm fluid in a bag. So 24/7, the baby, as it's growing, is in touch with this warm fluid, which it starts associating with a sense of security and love. And therefore, you might have seen that when the baby just comes out of its mother's womb, the first thing that the nurse does is to try and quickly cover the baby with a piece of cloth, so that the child who is missing that warmth and that touch, because the outside air may be a little colder too. So as soon as it starts missing that touch and that warmth, it tries to provide a substitute with that piece of cloth which it wraps it in. So, and this remains a basic need throughout life. And we all know that many of us, even in summers when it's quite hot, like to have at least a thin bed sheet when we sleep. Without that, we can't go to sleep properly. So love is a very basic need. And with all the varying and fluctuating attitudes to one human being touching another, with the time and place, these norms have been changing. These days, many people are starved of that touch. And the result is that, at least in Western countries, now hugs are being sold. You can go to Google and search for hugs on sale, and you'll get so many entries. But then a hug that is bought will not have the same impact as a touch, which is genuine and is an expression of true love. Touch, in fact, is one of the 5 ways, according to Gary Chapman, in which love may be expressed. So, touch is one of the 5 love languages that he talks about. Touch is one of them. What are the other 4? The other 4 are giving compliments, paying compliments to the person one loves, giving a gift to the person whom one loves, doing some work for the person one loves. For example, a girl may offer to cook some food which she knows her boyfriend likes very much, or the boy may offer to get the tickets. These days, of course, you don't have to go to the railway station or to a travel agent to get the tickets. But when that was necessary, the boy would offer to do that even they have to travel, or even if the girl alone has to travel. Uh, these days, there are other types of things which boys offer each other. So, doing some work for the other person is also an expression of love. And even if there's nothing else to be done, nothing has to be given, just spending time together is also an expression of love, because you are giving time freely. Not only you are giving it freely, you are enjoying that time. And during that time, you are making yourself deliberately vulnerable, if I may put it that way, which means that you don't mind sharing anything. You are ready to sort of, in fact, more or less very naturally, spontaneously, you start sharing secrets and all those things which you may not freely talk about to others. So, all that is an expression of love. And these are the 4 love languages besides touch. But then, if one were to add another one, which of course can go with spending time together, eating together, having some food, offering food, and consuming happily and the food that has been offered by somebody, and eating it together. Now, that also is an important love language apart from these. These days, there's a lot of talk about good and bad touch, and sometimes it is oversimplified. It is said that a good touch is that in which you touch certain parts of the body, and a bad touch that in which you touch some other parts of the body. Now, this to some extent may be okay, but it's more or less ridiculous, because any boy who touches a girl for the first time will not touch at parts which may be objectionable. So, if the part touched is the only criterion, then all such touches are good, but we know that they are not. It's gradually when he finds that the girl is becoming more accepting and is not objecting, that he may go to more intimate areas and finally reach those parts which are called bad touch. So he doesn't start with that. But then, right from the beginning, the touch was never good, perhaps. Now, what is the distinction then between good and bad touch? Essentially, you see, good love is about giving. We saw the higher rungs of love are about giving, not about getting. So a good touch will be that in which the focus is on giving joy to the person being touched. The person who is touching will also get that joy because both giving and receiving love both give us joy. They are a basic need and both give us joy, and that's not sinful. But what is the focus on? If the focus is on giving joy to the person who is being touched, then the touch is good. If the focus is on how much joy I am getting by that touch, how much pleasure I am getting from that touch, in fact, it will no longer be joy. If I am getting it and now that the other person is not getting it, it will no longer be joy. It will be just a pleasure, a fleeting pleasure, a pleasure which has some happiness, which has been already diluted by a sense of guilt. And if it is that, then it is a bad touch. Now, how can we know whether the touch is good and bad? Because that depends upon what is going on in the mind of the person who is touching. Yes, it may not be very obvious on the outside. The person who knows it best, whether the touch is good or bad, is the person who is touching. Because he only knows whether the intention is to give joy or to receive just a fleeting pleasure. The next best, the person who knows it the next best, is the one who is being touched. Because no matter how uh, cleverly the intention of love is camouflaged, there are subtle ways in which the person being touched knows that the touch is not good. So, good and bad touch depends more on the intention, whether the intention is primarily to give joy or to get some pleasure, knowing that the other person is not enjoying it. So, one has to, and that is what distinguishes, truly speaking, a good touch from a bad touch. Now we go to this third part of the triad, and that is sex. Now, Sri Aurobindo says in most men, the sexual is the strongest of all the impulses of nature. And not one of the strongest, he has called it the strongest. And only men, why not women? Both have their importance because while in men, the sexual urge is the strongest of all the impulses of nature, in women, love it perhaps scores more than the sex desire. And this is a gender difference which both boys and girls would do well to keep in mind because what is in the mind of the boy when he's getting into a romantic relationship is sex, whereas what may be in the mind of the girl is more of love expressed through hugs and kisses. That is the uppermost on her mind. So there is a gender difference, and this is something which one should keep in mind. Sex is not only a need, it is also a necessity. Because how will the world continue unless children keep coming? And the only way, so far at least, in human beings to get babies is to have sex. And therefore, sex is not only a need, it is a necessity for the continuation of the species, continuation of the world as we know it, continuing to have a world which has human beings. So it's also a necessity. And recognizing this necessity in the ancient Indian culture, four pillars of life were considered equally important. The first one was kama or the desires. To have desires is legitimate, including the sex desire. Then artha is the means through which those desires can be satisfied. In some cases, it could be money, but having a partner is also one of those means through which the desires can be satisfied. So trying to secure, procure, accumulate those means which will help us satisfy the desires was also considered legitimate. But then, while the desires are legitimate and therefore we also have to acquire the means to satisfy them, it was considered important that this is done within the framework of right and wrong. That is what dharma, truly speaking, means. Dharma doesn't mean religion, dharma is a sense of right and wrong. And it was considered important that the desires should be satisfied and the means for satisfying them should be procured through right means, avoiding what is wrong. And why is that important? Because the ultimate aim of life is moksha or liberation. And what is that? That is not uh, leaving this world and going into some other world which is far more beautiful. That in any case will happen. We'll leave this world, whether we go to a beautiful world or not so beautiful a world, that is another question. But very often this moksha meant so that we don't have to come back to this world again. But then even those who believe that that is the highest uh, aim of life, to have a type of have a liberation from this life by death and then never coming back to this world again, also know that that uh, freedom from coming back to this world depends upon how we have spent this life. It is the karmas of this life which will determine whether coming back to this world again is necessary or not necessary. If not enough progress has been made in this life, then one has to come back anyway again for the journey of the soul to continue. But of course, assuming that one has reached a level where it is not necessary to come back to this world, Sri Aurobindo says that even when it is not necessary, many would decide actually to come back. Why? For the sake of others, on whom they can have a positive impact. And secondly, because they can have that blissful experience of engaging with the world without getting entangled, without making their life complicated, without sorrow and suffering. They'll be able to look at it like a spectator from a distance without suffering in the world the way most people do. So that itself is a sort of moksha. In fact, for that moksha, or at least progressing towards that moksha, death is not necessary if one can make one's happiness independent of external circumstances. You know, how much money I have, what type of house I live in, what clothes I wear, which car I drive, uh, how beautiful my wife is, or how well my children are doing in school, or what a good job my children and have got, and so on and so forth. These are all external circumstances. Now, if our happiness is dependent upon these, either we are sure to be unhappy because life is never 100%, or if all is going well, then we would start worrying how long will it last, because we know none of these things is going to last forever. And if these things last long enough for us to start feeling that at least they are lasting very long, and therefore we more or less take them for granted and say that at least in my life it seems that these things are not going never going to disappear, so one starts taking them for granted. If that is what is happening, then another type of problem comes in. One starts getting saturated with all that and starts feeling that still there is some gap in life, some void in life. One starts feeling uh, uncomfortable and can't even always figure out what is it that is missing in my life if I have everything, all is going well. Now, that happens because all the physical and emotional needs have been satisfied. Perhaps the intellectual level, the work is also intellectually satisfying, but still the needs of the soul have not been met. And that is why people who achieve just about everything that they can imagine, uh, or they wished for when they were young, so they eventually start feeling, if all continues to go well for a long time, uh, they start feeling that there's still some gap in my life, there's some void in my life. And when they can't put their finger at the right place, they may go into a depression. Most commonly leads to what we call burnout these days. No, many business executives and so on are uh, getting just about everything which is considered sort of a criterion of a successful worldly life quite early in life. And by the time they're 40 or 50, uh, they start having a burnout because now they feel that all this is not giving me that satisfaction anymore. And I've seen the other side of it too. But then what is it that is really missing in my life? And extreme cases, as happens in case of many uh, film stars, a lot of success, name and fame and everything very early in life. And life has not been understood well. What happens is they go into a depression and they start taking antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills, sleeping pills, and go on what has become fashionable these days to go on therapy. Now, all those things, why if they have everything? Because all that has not been able to give them a sense of fulfillment, which comes only when we fulfill the purpose of life, which doesn't come from all this worldly success. Some of this success is important. That is why karma has been considered legitimate. Yes, having desires is legitimate. Trying to fulfill them is also legitimate. All of them will not be fulfilled. That's also understandable. But then, if moksha is the ultimate aim, moksha in this life itself is important, which means realizing that the satisfaction of all those worldly desires will not bring lasting happiness. and will eventually make us feel that gap in life, that void in life which still remains, and that will come from something qualitatively different, not from more of the same, not from still more money or still more worldly success or still more name and fame. It will not come from that. It will come from something radically different. And when we realize that, then our happiness no longer, in fact, remains dependent on all these external factors, all these props like success and money and name and fame and so on. It will not be dependent on that. Now, overcoming any type of dependence itself is freedom. That itself is liberation. So one can have moksha in this very life. That is moksha in this life. Now, turning to uh, sex from another angle. Now, the expressions of sex can be gross and subtle. And this is important for young people to understand because there are many subtle expressions of sex in which there is only an element of sex, but the society by and large condones it or accepts it and doesn't object to it. So there are many subtle expressions of sex available to young people. And if one were to sort of put it in completely honest and sincere terms, everything else being equal, if an interaction between a man and a woman gives greater pleasure than that between two men or between two women, an element of sex is involved. Because if it is giving greater pleasure, everything else being equal, then where is that additional pleasure coming from? Obviously, it is coming from the difference between the genders of the two, the man and the woman. Whether it is everything else being equal means that, say, if it comes to having a friendship or a close relationship, then everything else being equal would mean that they have similar socioeconomic status, they have similar ideas about life, they have similar goals and aspirations in life, or in spiritual terms, they have more or less the same level of consciousness. Now, so everything else being equal, everything else being equal uh, could also mean the type of interaction between them. For example, the interaction may be just talking, or the interaction may be that one of them is a caregiver and the other is being given the care. Hmm? So, a man taking care of a man or a woman taking care of a woman gives less pleasure than the other than if a man is taking care of a woman or a woman is taking care of a man. So that's again an interaction. It's equal in the sense that the type of interaction is exactly the same. It's being care one person is being cared for when the person is sick. Hmm? There's an anecdote which may not be genuine, but all the same, it does convey a point that there was a beautiful nurse. And, uh, the nurses have to take the pulse rate, the heart rate of their patients a few times in a day. So she was a pretty nurse, and she had realized by experience that whenever she takes the heart rate of a man, she has to put the hand on the wrist to count the heart rate. So whenever she did that, uh, she knew that the heart rate of the patient goes up. And therefore, she subtracted 10 from the heart rate of any man whose pulse she checked. Now, why is that difference there? At least the man is enjoying it more than if a man were to take his pulse rate, and that's why his heart rate is going up. So there is an element of sex involved even in that. So if one were to sort of be totally honest, everything else being equal, the interaction between a man and a woman invariably gives greater pleasure than a comparable or identical interaction between two men or two women, and therefore obviously that additional pleasure is coming from sex. So an element of sex is involved. Now, apart from this element of sex, which is involved in the most subtle expressions of sex, some expressions involve a certain degree of sexual impurity. And this again is important because this essentially is the topic of today's discussion. In romantic relationships between one boy and one girl who have developed some unique affinity for each other and are developing an exclusive relationship, uh, going steady with each other, one might say, there is a certain element of sexual impurity involved. Why are we calling it impurity and not just an element of sex? Because along with it, along with the sexual element, go many egoistic demands in this situation. And that happens because this type of love is primarily rooted in the ego. And therefore, it starts at the lowest rung of love. That is, the focus is on how much happiness am I getting in the company of this person. It's rooted in the ego and therefore associated also with these expressions of the ego, like possessiveness, exclusivity, that this person is now only mine, I possess her, and therefore should love only me and not somebody else. Not only should not love anybody else, uh, any interaction, even the most innocuous interaction with somebody else, is not seen very favorably, and that is what we call jealousy. And if these egoistic demands are not met to the extent that the person is expecting, it may lead to anger. Now, these are some of the expressions of this, and that is why we call it sexual impurity. And the most gross expression is, of course, having the indulging in the physical act of sex. That's understandable. So that is the gross expression. So the expressions of sex can be extremely subtle and, of course, gross, and a lot in between. Now, coming to this triad, which the major aim of this session, how to reconcile sexuality with safety, dignity, and spirituality. To some extent, the three overlap, but for convenience, I've tried to sort of sort them out a bit. Now, for safety, one of the important things is to wait for the right time for developing an exclusive relationship for that of that type. And why this has become important is because as early as age 10, sometimes children these days are developing these exclusive relationships. And it's not something very, it's not the age which is important, it's that they are not prepared for it. They've not learned enough about it, and therefore they are uh, likely to suffer also more because of some inevitable complications that are associated with such relationships. So one should wait for the right time. And what should one do during that waiting time? Educate yourself about these matters. And particularly in the digital age these days, there are additional risks involved. Understand them well. And till then, since sexuality is developing, satisfy yourself with subtle expressions. What sort of subtle expressions? Like, say, having a party in which there are both boys and girls, going on a picnic with the boys and girls together, going for a picnic, going for a picnic, going for a movie, going for having a party, having a dance, or whatever. I mean, going for whatever, some fun, playing together, having games together. So these are subtle expressions of sex, which the society, which are acceptable in many societies, including ours. And satisfy yourself with these subtle expressions rather than going for an exclusive relationship. For that, it's better to wait for the right time. Why these subtle expressions are not only acceptable, but perhaps also necessary at that stages when sexuality is developing, because otherwise, what would happen, particularly in boys, is that they'll keep thinking about it, and they'll feel that if they get gather the idea that it's sinful, which is also very easy to gather in the social sort of environment which most of us live, and it's not restricted only to this country. It, to some extent, applies to the entire world. We associate a certain sense of guilt or a certain type of sinfulness associated with sexual activity, and therefore, when the young person is developing that, if he is trying to keep away from it, not even giving subtle expressions to it, then he will be at least thinking too much about it. Thinking too much about it negatively, that is, I don't have to do it, is a type of suppression. So thinking too much, even for suppressing it, makes it in fact worse. That's what Sri Aurobindo has told us. Now, here some people would say perhaps that I'm quoting it out of context, because following this, he has said one more sentence, that instead of thinking too much out of sex, occupy yourself with more positive thoughts. Now, what one has to see is that he has not said that indulge in subtle expressions of sex. What he has said is occupy your mind with more positive thoughts. Don't think about sex, even for suppressing it. Now, one has to understand the context. He was answering in a letter to a disciple who had selected an exclusively spiritual life in the ashram. So for this person, even subtle expressions of sex were not acceptable. And therefore, he was told to, instead of thinking about sex, even for suppressing it, occupy your mind with something more positive. So for that person, it was different. But there are very few people who will do that at a young age. And we are talking today about the average young person who is so occupied with it that we can say that, well, subtle expressions are acceptable. And along with that, let him continue to understand this issue more, educate himself more, so that he can have a proper relationship at a later stage when he's truly ready for it. But this fact that thinking too much about it, even for suppressing it, will actually make it worse, which means you'll think even more about it, you'll be more preoccupied with it, is valid for everyone. Now we come to the dignity part. And for this, one has to learn dealing with acceptance as well as rejection. Because both these things are a part of these exclusive relationships. One may be accepted, or the other partner may reject right from the beginning, or the rejection may come later when they have a quarrel and don't want to see you ever again. That sort of an attitude could, that type of an incident could happen in any such relationship. Tell you a little sort of in a uh, in a lighter vein. Uh, Once that is what happened between a boy and a girl. They decided, told each other, never want to see you ever again, and so on and so forth. Huh? Now, for some, they kept away from each other. But then the boy, he started feeling like going and seeing her. And then, every time he would feel that if I go, then I may be humiliated. In fact, taking the initiative to go itself is partly humiliating. And then once I actually go and she humiliates me, then what will happen? There's an Urdu couplet on this. दिल तो करता है यार को मिलने का दिल तो करता है यार को मिलने का अक्ल कहती है मत जा बड़ी जिल्लत होगी. On the conflict between the emotional part of the being and the intellect. The emotional part of the being is desperate to meet her. The intellect says don't go, you will be humiliated. Now, uh, this interaction between the emotional part of the being and the intellect is something we talk so often in these talks on spirituality, and that's why I brought it in. Now, the intellect is supposed to save us from going astray and help us govern and moderate our emotions. So, in this case, that's what the intellect is doing, trying to moderate it, govern it by telling him, don't go, you'll be humiliated. So, that's what the intellect is doing. But then the emotions are extremely powerful and they can usually override the intellect. And then the intellect is able to invent a new reason for doing something that we want to feel like doing anyway at the emotional level. So after this tussle has gone in this person's mind, in this boy's mind, uh, the emotional part of the being says go, the heart says go, the head says don't go, you'll be humiliated. After this conflict between the head and the heart has gone on for some time, the head may now invent a reason for going. I'm sure she's also feeling like seeing me. Now he's found a reason why he should go. Just as I'm feeling like going, she's also feeling like seeing me. So now he feels that I can go. Now, how about the soul coming in? Because very often in these discussions, we also bring in that uh, the real guidance will come neither from the emotional part of the being nor the intellect. The best guidance will come from the soul. Now, take another situation. This boy and the girl have broken off. I never want to see you again. But then it so happens that one of them meets a serious road accident. Hmm? And through the contacts or from wherever, they are able to discover that this person can be informed. And so this person who was friendly with uh, and this person who has met the road accident once upon a time, now they have broken off, but then that person is contacted. Now he forgets everything about what had happened in the past and immediately rushes there. Now, when this person rushes there, who is making, he's forgetting about what happened in the past, he's forgetting about humiliation, which may be possible, and overriding all this, he just rushes there. Now, why does he do that? because that is the voice of the soul, doesn't go into all these arguments. It just tells us what the right thing to do is. So, one of the things that brings dignity to these relationships is learning to deal properly with acceptance as well as rejection, particularly rejection. Now, how about spirituality? Now, spirituality, one can take these romantic relationships as an enjoyable apprenticeship in moving towards what will help us fulfill the purpose of life. Because as a teenager, what happens is that the person is all wrapped up in himself. It's all about me, mine, and myself. Huh? The person puts himself at the center of the universe and feels as if the entire world has been made to satisfy his or her needs. Maybe exaggerating it, but that is essentially what a teenager is about. He thinks no end of himself and thinks that everybody else knows much less, is much less intelligent, I am always right, and puts himself at the center. But then suddenly something happens, and he is in love with somebody. And now this person admits into this narrow circle of me, mine, and myself one more person. Now it is not just me, now it is the two of us. So this relationship now becomes a way of breaking this ego barrier, widening the ego circle to include at least two persons. So when two persons are in it, that is the beginning of the purification of the development of true love and the purification of this love, expansion of this love, as we shall see. So this is a beginning uh, of a process which will eventually have great significance in life. So even if it is the lowest rung of love, the love is focusing on how much happiness I get in the company of the other person, still it is worth it, because unless we take the first step, how can we go further? Now, relevant to safety, dignity, and spirituality is also regulation of sexual relationships. There's no society anywhere in the world where this relationship is entirely unregulated. In fact, there are multiple regulations: legal regulations, moral regulations, social regulations, conventional regulations, religious regulation. There's no end to the types of regulation that are there in every society in the world when it comes to sexual relationships. But the best regulation is self regulation. And that is what we shall focus on. And although, I mean, everything applies to both boys and girls, but the first 2 points I'll dismiss quickly, but that advice is more for, or that type of regulation is required by girls rather than boys. That is, they should try to avoid doing anything which will bring them unwanted attention from boys. Secondly, avoid unsafe time and place. Now, I know getting further into details in this could land me into trouble because these are controversial topics. But all the same, these are fundamentals. Uh, and that is something which one has to learn to accept, because the way the world is constituted at the present level of consciousness, these things can land a girl in trouble. More likely, if we expect the police to do everything, that doesn't happen anywhere in the world, because there's no society in which you can have enough policemen to be available all the time at every place whenever any such incident happens. Because the one who is doing anything unacceptable, illegal, or immoral chooses his time and place with care. And therefore, one can't depend upon the police or blame the police for it. Now, the point that I have here is what to do when rejected. This applies more to boys than to girls. Because invariably, what happens is that a girl, when she rejects a boy, where it's the beginning or somewhere in the middle, she can't always give a good reason for it. Because these things don't work on love. Love is something which is outside the realm of reason, and it's something which you can't always explain, and she doesn't have to explain. But then when that happens, what does the boy initially do? He tries to persuade her, he tries to woo her, he tries to impress her. He tries to be nice to her. Well, all that is acceptable, all that is good. But suppose she still continues to reject him. Then what does he do? He gets angry. Why can't you understand? I love you so much. Starts getting angry. Why can't you see it? Now, this is when it comes out that actually he never loved her in the first place because his whole focus is on how much happiness he gets. Well, if he gets angry and then settles down and finally rejects her, finally sort of leaves her alone, even then it may be okay. But where in some cases, not in every case, but those cases are frequent enough for us to understand that they do happen. He expresses this anger when everything fails. He finally expresses this anger by throwing acid on her face, or by raping her, or by killing her. Now, all these things do happen. Now, that is when it becomes very clear that he actually never loved her in the first place. He loved only himself as an individual. His whole focus was on how much happiness I'm getting in her company. And when she denies him that happiness, he's out to harm her. One doesn't harm anyone whom one loves. So, how can he express his love if he truly loves her and is rejected? The way to express her, it would be not by hurting her, but by seeing to it what is which will make her happy. Because when you love somebody, you want to make the object of love happy. You don't hurt her. How can you make her happy? By leaving her alone. So that is what the boy should do when rejected. He can try all reasonable methods. Let him try to impress her, woo her, please her, and so on and so forth. All that he can do. But finally, when he finds that nothing is working, it's better to leave her alone because that is what will make her happy. And if he truly loves her, let him make him happy. So that is important. Now, so self regulation is the most important regulation. And to be able to grow towards it and understand these things, both parenting and schooling are important. And unfortunately, both parents and teachers treat this subject as taboo, and sex education is not a part of our upbringing, whether it is in school or in at home. And if occasionally there's some talk of sex education, what we think of is the biology of sex, which is the least important. It is other things which are far more important than the biology of sex. The need for sex and reproduction was understood uh, in the Indian culture, and therefore, just as we had these four pillars, the Kama, Artha, Dharma, and Moksha, we also understood that different aspects of life would have a greater uh, sort of importance at different stages of life. And so life was arbitrarily divided into these four phases of approximately 25 years each. The exact age is not material, but the sequence is something which is based on so much of common sense that one can easily understand it. Brahmacharya for student life, Grihastha as a householder after marriage and having children too, and Vanaprastha, that is, one may uh, start detaching oneself from this householder's life, and sannyasa is a total detachment. So these are the four phases, and one can see that they make a lot of sense. They are based on common sense rather than anything else. But then you would also see that when one is a student, one is not only learning everything that is a part of the conventional curriculum, but one is also learning how to become a better householder. One is learning about romantic relationships, about uh, facts about the how to have a happy marriage, learning how to be a good parent. All these things are also a part. So it means that learning includes all these things also. So in that way, brahmacharya becomes a preparation for grihastha. And during grihastha, the way the person looks after the family, that becomes a preparation for detachment when these basic responsibilities are over. So the grihastha should be lived in such a way, and that will happen when during grihastha the person is not only engaged in kama and artha, but is keeping dharma in mind with the ultimate aim being moksha. Moksha, not necessarily after death, but in this very world, so that then he's no longer dependent upon anything for his happiness, anything external for his happiness, including the children. So he's preparing himself for that. And he's preparing for Vanaprastha. And during Vanaprastha, The process has begun and he's preparing himself for a total detachment during sannyasa. So each stage of life is a preparation for the next. And each stage of life can contribute to addressing the purpose of life. It's not that purpose of life will be served only when one takes sannyas and the rest, we are just trapped in all these worldly relationships. They are not traps. During brahmacharya, the student is fulfilling the purpose of life by expressing his gratitude to the parents, to the teachers, by providing the parents and the teachers an opportunity for them to express their love for him by giving him what he needs. Giving an opportunity is also giving something. You see, because we saw that both giving love and receiving love is important. Parents and teachers want to give that love, but how will they do it unless there's a child or a student available for it? So the student is providing an opportunity apart from expressing gratitude, apart from doing some seva for the in the traditional gurukulam for the guru. Now all those things are okay, but basically he's providing an opportunity. Grihastha, of course, very easy to see how much uh, during Grihastha, expression of love is by giving, giving to the partner, giving to the children, giving to the parents, giving to the in-laws, and giving to the society. Now, all that is in householder's life, and that's why it's a difficult phase, and in fact, a great opportunity for spiritual growth. If it is based, because spiritual growth is based on expressing our love by giving what we have to those who need it. It is doing grihastha that the person has the economic means, is physically pretty strong, and he has around him uh, close relatives who are related by blood or marriage, as well as a lot of society which is also expecting something from him. And that's why it's sometimes also called the sandwich generation, because you are pressed between two extremes. You have to care for this generation, you have to care for the older generation, you also care for your own generation. So three generations, between two generations, one younger and one older, is squeezed this generation which is in the phase of grihastha. So again, this is not a phase which is to be considered that we are trapped in these responsibilities. So there's no time for spirituality, and how can we grow spiritually? Because it is in fact a great opportunity. And vanaprastha and sannyasa, of course, more clear because you are relatively free from these responsibilities, and you can shower your love irrespective of blood and marriage relationships or any other external considerations. These criteria are no longer important in vanaprastha and sannyasa for expressing your love. So that's why Sri Aurobindo said that this is somewhat like a ladder that is moving from the lowest rungs of love to the highest, because expressing love for those who are not related to us by blood or marriage, who are not a part of our responsibility, is spiritually much more significant. So it is a higher level of love. The Indian system did not entirely leave this difficult growth and spiritual growth, to the individual's unaided inner initiative. It supplied him with a framework. So it's not depend upon just sort of inner initiative like going and sort of meditating 24 hours a day. It supplied him with a framework within worldly life. It gave him a scale and gradation for his work, which could be made into a kind of ladder rising in that sense, rising from the lowest rungs of love in a romantic relationship and rising to the highest when you are showering your love without any such external objective criteria. This high convenience was the object of the four ashramas because it makes it convenient. You move from the simple to the difficult. Loving a partner because you're romantically involved is very easy. Loving your own child after your marriage is very easy. Marriage is to love someone to whom one is not related in any such way. So we are moving from the simple to the complex. And therefore, it's a convenient way of providing us material in the worldly life for fulfillment of the purpose of life. So now we'll go into the rungs of love a little more in detail. And you can see that like the staircase, it's a long staircase, a steep one, and not a very neat one. So the path of love is not easy. It's a difficult path, no matter which phase of love you are in. So the first phase is, you can say, falling in love. Why is it called falling? if it is such a noble thing. It's called falling in love because this is the phase in which the person is only under the illusion of being in love. The person thinks that I love somebody because I'm so much happy in the company of this person. This girl makes me so happy, and therefore the boy thinks I'm in love with her. But actually, the truth comes out if she rejects him, as we saw. He was never in love with her. He was loving himself. He loved the happiness that he got in her company. That's why, therefore, it's a fall. But all the same, unless we start with the initial steps, how can we go higher? So any type of love is better than no love at all. What is the next phase? Getting up. After one has fallen, one has to get up. And when does one get up? Usually after marriage. Because this is when one realizes that one can't go on getting without also giving. So it becomes a give and take relationship. And it may continue for a long time in that way. It becomes a mechanical and dull routine. The focus is on children, and they are the ones who get genuine love, not the partner. And then, one wonders that, well, uh, things are quite smooth, going on all right in a successful marriage. But all the same, that passion is gone, that zing is gone, that zest is gone, because it is based on that give and take. Uh, there's no longer that passion, that illusion is gone. Illusion of being in love is gone. But how about the next phase, which is the highest rung, that is rising in love, which is primarily about giving. It can occur in marriage. Very often it happens uh, even in marriages which are otherwise not doing so well through a crisis. The husband loses the job, or the wife has an incurable illness, or some such things happen, or one of the partners has a bereavement. So those are the types of situations in which the person forgets himself. This is that, well, I have been with this person for 20 years, 30 years, and now I can't leave this person alone. So you are only thinking of what you can give this person to bring this person out of this difficult situation. This person's difficult situation is not only his or her difficulty, it is our difficulty. You start treating yourself as a unit, you become one. And becoming one is essentially what love is about. So that is rising in love. I'll try to illustrate it through marriage, but then the today's session is not primarily about marriage, so we'll not get into it deeper. But this essentially these are the essential rungs of love. Falling in love, which is primarily about getting something from the loving relationship, mm, and then getting up and realizing that you can't go on getting without giving, so it becomes give and take. And the final is loving for the sake of loving, because you start valuing and appreciating the joy of giving. So the movement from the lower rungs to the higher rungs depends essentially on two processes: the purification of love and expansion of love. Purification involves moving from getting, giving. Of course, in between will come the stage of giving and getting, but then there's a continuous spectrum. So that is the purification of love, and it will purify it of those egoistic demands, the sexual impurity, and all those impurities that we talked about, rooted in the ego, like possessiveness, exclusivity, and all other types of egoistic demands, which, if they are not met, will lead to anger. So all that will involves a process of purification, and essentially that purification is about the focus shifting from getting to the focus being on giving. Then expansion of love, that is proliferation of the objects of love. The romantic relationship starts with one, but then the love doesn't have to remain confined to one. Love is infinite, and therefore doesn't have to be showered on only one. And marriage again provides us an opportunity, and inbuilt in the life cycle is that expansion when come the children. So now the ego circle has been expanded further. It includes not only the partner but also the children. So from one to many, and then eventually should come a stage when one starts treating many as one. How can many be as one? This one refers to the one God. So you start treating the many as manifestations of God. सभी भगवान का रूप है. When you start seeing that, then love can be expressed without those considerations of blood or marriage or professional relationship, like this is my student or this is my patient, and therefore I have to love this person, uh, or any other narrow criteria like this person should uh, belong to the same clan, same country, or same religion, or speak the same language. Now, all those things disappear so long as this person is in front of me, and this person needs something which I can give. I'm willing to give it because I love everyone as the one. So from one to many, and from many as one. So this rungs, moving from the lowest rungs to the higher strungs, essentially involves these two things: purification of the love, purification from the egoistic impurities, and expansion from being restricted to just one with whom one is in a romantic relationship, eventually to many as one. Now, Sri Aurobindo says that somewhere, and we can easily understand it and relate to it, that the expectations of anybody in love are intensity and permanence. And this anybody in a romantic relationship can understand the intensity part. Huh? I love you so much. Hmm? So, that so much part indicates the intensity. And permanence, I will love you forever. And one expects it to last forever, the relationship to last forever, uh, kabhi na honge juda, so that permanence. So these are the two things one expects in love: intensity and permanence. And somewhere deep within, we also know that in romantic relationships, or for that matter, any relationship, any type of loving relationships in the world, they cannot really last because all worldly things are impermanent in nature. So at least the permanence part can't be there. But then both these can happen if we continue to go to higher rungs of love. How does intensity increase as a result of this purification? We'll see in a moment. But then, as we move, this purification essentially means moving from loving with the mind, that is the heart and the head, and from there moving to the soul, moving loving with the soul, our deepest self. So it is when we love with the soul that we realize that oneness, that level of at which we are all one, is the soul, because our souls are identical. We come from the same source, or to broadly speaking, we are, or sort of simply speaking, we are children of the same God. So as we move from the level of the mind to the level of the soul and purify, the intensity can be maintained and can in fact increase. We'll come to that in a moment. But permanence part, again, one can see as one moves one from many, even before one goes to the many as one, still it can have permanence because the same persons may not be there, but we'll always have somebody around. So there'll be always someone on whom you can shower your love. So expanding from one to many lends it a certain permanence in recurrence, even if the object of love is not constant. And this is something which people who are loving by nature has been seen, that those who live to be 90 or 100 years old. Now, the people whom they loved as young people, most of them are gone. Some of times, even their children are gone before themselves. But then what keeps them going if they are loving by nature? And they live that long generally only if they are loving by nature. That is one of the common things that has been seen, that those who live that long have that capacity to love. So what keeps them going is that they always have an object of love or some objects of love available, because they have been moving from one to many, and they always have somebody around on whom and they can shower their love. So that lends it a sort of permanence. Now, love at the level of the soul is what Sri Aurobindo has called the psychic love. As we move from the love which originates in the mind to love which originates in the soul, we call it psychic love. Can psychic love have the same intensity? We saw that it can have a certain type of permanence because of expansion. But can it have the same intensity? And he says that yes, in fact, the intensity can be even greater. The only difference is that the flame is white, not red. Now, what does this white flame mean? What means that it's a pure flame? Mm. It has that purity which comes from the soul. It has been purified through the process of purification. So, as that purification takes place, The intensity doesn't have to disappear. The intensity is of a different type. The flame is white, not red. And as any student of chemistry knows, that the hottest part of the flame is not the red part. And eventually, when we move from the love for human beings to love for the divine, that is what we call bhakti. Psychic love for the human beings can pave the way for bhakti. Can pave. What I'm saying is that doesn't necessarily have to, and moreover, in many, bhakti can be the starting point. Bhakti can be the starting point itself. But psychic love, that is, as love grows from one to many, it paves the way for bhakti, because if you keep treating those many as expressions of the divine, then it can pave the way for bhakti. Bhakti for the divine or love for the divine can also mean love for all the creation, love for all those whom the all those who embody the divine, and all creation embodies the divine. So, in that sense, psychic love paves the way for love for the divine. Now, this is a quote from Savitri, which brings out the rungs of love. All our earth starts from mud and ends in sky, and love that was once an animal's desire, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, an ardent comradeship in the happy mind, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. So the lowest rung of love may be called mud. So we start from mud, but the highest rung of love is in the sky. That's how love evolves. Love that was once an animal's desire, that is the lowest rung of love. Then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, that is romantic human love. An ardent comradeship in the happy mind, comradeship, partnership, sharing life together, shouldering responsibilities of life together, that is married life, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. Eventually, it becomes that love which provides space for a, the spiritual aspiration to express itself through universal love. And therefore, any type of love is better than no love at all. And one may start with mud, but we know that it can go up to the sky. So the important thing is not to worry too much about the starting with the lowest rung of love. The important thing is not to get stuck there and rise to higher levels as life goes on. So therefore, love is an essential thing. It Love must not cease to live upon the earth. It should continue to exist on earth. For love is the bright link twixt earth and heaven. This is what will link earth to heaven, bring the beauty of heaven on earth. Love is the far transcendent angel here. That's the representative, the ambassador, the angel. The transcendent refers to the divine. The love is the far transcendent angel here. Love is man's lien on the absolute. The absolute again refers to the divine, because absolute is in the absolute reality is the divine. Absolute reality is one which is imperishable, constant, everlasting. So man's love is man's lien on the absolute. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making the session possible, and thank you all for being there.
Thank you so much, sir, for this thoughtful talk. You helped us navigate a deeply complex and sensitive topic with clarity, compassion, and wisdom. We are truly grateful for your guidance today, sir. Thank you so much. Can we open the session to the participants?
Sure, sure.
Participants, if you have any questions or if you want to share any reflections, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and speak up, or you can drop your messages in the chat box. I'll read them out. Please go ahead. Okay, so I think we do not have any questions today. So before we close today's session, let me inform that the recording of today's session will be available on our YouTube channel, Yes Spirituality. Please do visit the channel and explore more content on yoga, education, and spirituality. Thank you once again, sir, for this lovely session. And thank you, participants, for being with us today. We'll close today's session now with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.